Welcome to the first in a series of webinars about race at work. In this first episode, we're going to be discussing the simple subject of how to talk about race in the workplace. Lots of themes to discuss, lots of opinions given, and some resources and some guidance as well. Hopefully you'll find it useful. If you do, please do hit subscribe and be alerted of future videos from Project 23. Also, we're going to refer to a number of sources, so if you click the eye in the top right corner, we'll list them out for you as well. Thanks.
Okay, it is time, it's 1:15. If you're already here, welcome to our session today, which is all about how to talk about race in the workplace. It's good. I mean, we thought we would put this on pretty quickly, actually, because it felt like people were after it and needed it, and we thought people, after posting their black square, might not know where to go. And so we thought, let's just put this out there, and we've had, I don't know, 450 people register, which is great. But knowing normal webinar drop-offs, we've probably got 100 people that will show. While we wait a minute for everyone to join, should we just do personal introductions quickly? Gary, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So, hello everyone. My name's Gary Rayno. I am one of the co-founders of Project 23. Really excited to be having this conversation today. I think we're at a bit of a unique opportunity. The window's open slightly to have these conversations. Everyone out there in the organisation, certainly we've spoken to, and what I've seen beyond us, the conversations seem to be that much more prevalent in everyone's mind. Everyone seems to be, a couple of degrees more open to this. Obviously born out of tragic events, but let's not let it go to waste. Let's use that and let's have these conversations.
Wicked. Sharon, what brings you here?
I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant, and I am desperately passionate about equalities generally, but really, really passionate about race and the impact it's having on Black and brown people across the UK in particular.
Thank you. And actually, I just want to take the moment to say thank you to Ryan, who will introduce himself in a second. We thought it was important to also have a white perspective on this in this discussion, because obviously it's not a workshop, which is how most of us tend to work. And you guys are all there. You can use chat and you can send through Q&A for us. But actually, in terms of just a discussion and making it maybe a bit more engaging for you, we thought it'd be great to have a white British man join us, actually. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. So my name is Ryan Grogan. I work within sales at a recruitment technology business, and I am actively working to be an ally. So I use the word working. It's not kind of me about patting myself on the back and saying I'm a good person and I've got all the right stuff going on up here without actually putting in the work. So for me personally, it's something I'm quite passionate about. Growing up, my main inner circle of friends are people of colour, mainly Black. So we've been thinking and kind of talking around race for 20 plus years, but in the current climate, if you like, on the back of the resurgence of Black Lives Matter recently, more so than ever. And in my day job, I work with mostly white people. So that I'm hoping to kind of represent the perspective of a white person who wants to make a positive change and is willing to do the work, which hopefully represents a lot of our audience today. And obviously bring my lived experience to it.
Wicked, thank you very much. And also, just a bit of housekeeping. If you have noticed, we have Naomi, who's our BSL interpreter for today. And also there are closed captions for today as well, provided by MyClearText. So if you do need closed captions or would like them and you think they'd be of assistance, just hit the CC button at the bottom. And also in the chat, there should be a link there, which is for screen text if you need to cut and paste that and do what you need to do with that. Other bits of housekeeping, we've got a running time of about 45 minutes. We'll have a hard stop at 2 for those of you that need to go. But also we have also arranged for it for, if there are a lot of Q&As, then we'll extend for another 15 minutes at the end, but we will kind of summarize and stop at 2 o'clock for those that need to go. So I just want to say thank you all for taking the time. If you put a black square on and you've been thinking about what action that you can take, that kind of lends itself to why we put this on and what I'd like to get out today. and I share this with the panelists, which is that we want to make things better. You probably want to make things better, and that's why you've joined. And quite frankly, obviously, we know that posting a black square or doing anything else in that kind of showmanship is good, but it's just the start. And hopefully joining us today will enable you to not only have some tools, resource, inspiration to be able to talk about race in your workplace more than you can, or more than you could yesterday, but also that in itself, talking about race with our families, in our workplace, is how we get to the next step of understanding basically what the nuances are within our own organization. It's all well and good to do unconscious bias training or to set up ERGs or employee resource groups, but actually we need to know what the business needs. And we can't do that without being able to talk about race in our workplace, ethnicity, and other diversity inclusion issues without getting to the truth and talking about it properly. So that's the aim of today. I'm going to kick off by saying that if that is not your aim, then you're probably in the wrong space. You're probably in the wrong workshop, because we're going to be pretty punchy and pacey today. We are going to express our values and our position with regards to fighting racism, not just in the workplace. And if that's not for you, then feel free to go. I don't mind, but I would probably say maybe it's worth being curious and finding out what's going on here. So kicking us off, we're going to do a quick poll, actually, because it's important for us to know who we're speaking to and who's out there. Because when we're talking about race in the workplace or race in general, we want everyone to understand that it depends on who you are and who you're talking to. So I'm going to throw up a quick poll now, and please fill it out if you can. I'm going to put it up there. So please let us know if you identify as either white, a person of color, or you'd rather not say, which is absolutely fine. And even just ignore the poll if you like. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have got 72% of people are identifying as white, and 28% are identifying as a person of color. Thank you for filling it out. It's useful for us, and it's useful for us to steer the conversation. And it probably is a good into where we need to be to begin with, which is to acknowledge our ethnicity, our race, and those of people around us. Because, you know, you might have seen the narratives recently about it's not the right thing to say that I don't see color. I don't acknowledge color. We'll go into the detail of why that's not a good idea, but that's almost the starter of this. And this we start as we mean to go on, which is to acknowledge the ethnicity and celebrate the differences that we all have with each other. Okay, so we kind of got 3 kind of main agenda topics, or beats as I like to cornerly call them. And those are tone and regard, the tone and regard we have for this topic, this subject, and for the people that we work with or that we are around, or those that are in our society. Then we have education and knowledge as the second piece. What do we need to know? Where is there to find it? What can we give right here today? And then thirdly, less about how you communicate, like directly as the sender of the message, but more about how you receive it, how we can create a psychologically safe space, how we create psychological safety in what we do when we are talking about race in the workplace. And then we'll summarize and close. We've got a couple of slides to share. The format of this is going to be that we'll probably drop the subject in, and then we'll discuss it as a group. Obviously, feel free to answer questions, and we'll get to those at the end. One of us is keeping an eye on the chat too. So before we even really get into this, before we begin, when we discussed what was important to us to share in terms of tone and regard, there's 3 or 4 main points, right? And this, if anything, is what we're asking you to take away today. Because you all know how to communicate, but this is about your tone and regard for this subject. The first one is that racism exists. Racism exists in nearly all corners of the society, And certainly in your workplace, if you haven't done the work to be anti-racist, then you should definitely know, not just assume that it is. That's not okay, but what is okay is that there's a way to change that and you can impact that, which is why we're here. Sharon, do you want to, are you able to offer any insight into kind of where we're going to go with this in terms of systems?
Right, yeah, definitely. So first of all, let me thank everyone for attending. Some people like to frame this as a really sensitive subject. I don't say much because I just think it's a subject that we have to address. In terms of the work that I do and with the organisations that I work with, we really like to frame this and understand what racism, but actually in particular what white supremacy is. Lots of us are hearing these terms or the language being used, and it's quite triggering, particularly for a lot of our white colleagues. And really how I like to describe it, or the people that I work with, is really a system by which white people or whiteness and your proximity to it is seen as more superior or better than those cultures or belief systems that belong to or are practiced by people of colour. So really for me, it's a system-based relationship rather than an individual. What's happened recently is that you hear people using white supremacy in reference to really extreme people or extreme behaviours, so like neo-Nazis. And for me, that devalues what white supremacy is and how prevalent it is in our system and the way we govern our lives and our economy.
Yeah, in fact, if I start to share here, we could probably use this as a way to illustrate that.
Yeah.
So we think that we've got two versions of this. All you have to, this isn't our asset, by the way. All you have to do is Google a pyramid of white supremacy or pyramid of racism, and you'll get different versions of this. And we've got two to show you, because this is how we think we can help to explain and really confidently sit in the fact that racism exists. Is that often, building on what Sharon said there's this overt, socially unacceptable levels of racism. I'm not that. I definitely have never done those things. But actually using the pyramid, if you look at the base, this is the stuff that's usually happens more. And as you climb up into the point, obviously these things perhaps may happen less, but actually they're even more pointed. But this is a way in which we can talk about the fact that racism exists and there are levels of it. But to say that racism doesn't exist, but to know that, you've got, I see all lives matter, something that's going on at the moment, or I don't see color. These are the things that we need to explore and to personally reflect upon why we're saying those things and why it might be, or why it is racist. I don't know if anyone wants to add on to this. I can flick to the next as well. Gary, Ryan, anything? Cool. Okay, so this is just another version of that here. So you can see, if you have a look at, again, this, I think this slide is much better at showing the from socially acceptable to socially unacceptable climb here. And often, there are people, the indifference piece is a good example actually of where it's interesting. We had a conversation with a client just earlier who they know she, in her mind, she's open, she wants change, but actually she's saying we're not doing enough because we have a platform and we could do more to make a difference, but actually our inaction is indifference. So it's no good saying that, we are not a racist organization, but we're not anti-racist. That's not what this session is about, and that's not what needs to happen. We need to accept that actually we are racist, and we'll be right back where we plan what's going on in order for us to plan our anti-racist work. Okay, so hopefully, if I just stop sharing. Lost. Okay.
It stops on our screen, Elaine. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, peeps?
I was just going to add, actually, a lot of these terminologies, such as white supremacy or white savior or white privilege, I had many white friends. My wife is white, and I just want to raise the point about being comfortable with these terms and doing the work to really understand what these terms mean, rather than recoiling and rather than thinking, no, that's not me. These terms are loaded with connotations and loaded with history. And unless you really take the time to understand what these terms mean, it's easy to recoil and shut the conversation down, because we naturally, as most people do, go to the extreme examples of racism or white supremacy. And actually taking the time to understand what those terms mean in their entirety is really important in this conversation.
Definitely. Okay, so that's the first point. Tone and regard. Understand that racism exists. I said to someone the other day, because I stole it off from someone else on Instagram, just like using the metaphor of COVID, act and behave and operate like you have it. But the difference is here is that you probably do have it. That's the difference, okay? Second thing with regard to tone and regard, believe people and accept their truths, okay? This is hugely important. This is about the fact that you do not have the lived experience of someone of a different ethnicity or race. If a person of color has decided to share with you their lived experience or their feelings or emotions with regards to racism particularly, or their ethnicity or their race, do not think that you in any way, shape or form can shape or criticize how they are explaining that to you. Particularly if they're talking about racism. We're talking about traumatic events. You don't do that. You don't start to tell people who've had traumatic experience that they should maybe be more effective if they did it like this, maybe weren't so aggressive. That's the first people. That's the second thing. If you do not have you might have a shared experience. You might have biracial, you might have mixed race children. You may have, as Ryan said, grown up around a tight friendship, but you do not have the lived experience.
Yeah, I'd definitely say, Elaine, that was my experience in the last few weeks, month, that I had to kind of humble myself, if you like, to realise that despite my lived experience somewhat, there was still so much to know and learn. So I wasn't above that. And that meant kind of investing in more learning than ever before, really, to kind of pick up on the vocabulary that's needed to have these conversations, because I'm going to have them more than ever, whether it's with a person of colour or as it has been with white colleagues, etc. And I need to be able to represent the right side of this discussion in the right way. So that for me has definitely been something that I've needed to do and understand. And with that, you start to pick up on a lot of different things. So it's a lot of sort of subtle languages, box ticking being one. I don't know what it is. I don't know why everyone's so afraid of it. No one's suggesting a pointless exercise, but for some reason everyone seems to use it as an excuse for inaction, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that's really important, realizing that actually, no matter how much you think you may know, as a white person, we don't have that lived experience. And it's important to go into any conversation understanding that.
Thank you. Do any of you two want to add anything?
I'd like to go back to really just to touch on racism a little bit more. In the Robin DiAngelo explains this really well, that it's almost been placed in a binary space now. You're either good if you're not racist, bad if you are racist, and any act that's deemed to be racist is so loaded and emotive now. People are really scared to do the work. So as a Black woman, if there are discussions that I have, I can literally, if I've just described myself as a Black woman, you will see a physical change in people's responses to whatever comes after that when I say that. Now that's just simply a descriptor. So for me, I think it's really important for us to understand that accepting that we live in a system that is racist isn't a problem in and of itself, because it's a systemic thing as well. What we've done really cleverly, or what society's been able to do, is apportion being racist to individuals and their individual acts, which devalues the discussion that we have going forward after that. So if you are a bad person, you will do something that is deemed as racist. But actually, if you deem yourself to be a good person and someone says, actually, what you just did was racist, it doesn't matter. Well, no, it can't be racist because I'm a good person. I do yoga. I'm a vegetarian. I've got black friends. Or any person of color would have, you know, the list is endless as to why somebody can't be racist. Yes. So I think in terms of having the conversation, is not only is it about the lived experience thing, but you have to believe someone when they tell you their truth. Yes. Very often, discussions around race for those of us that are people of color aren't new to us. So I'm in my 40s. This is something that has been a 43-year journey. It's a journey, isn't it? So it may be new to a lot of us out there, but for those of us that are people of color, it isn't new to us. So believe us when we say something makes us feel uncomfortable or we receive it as being racist.
Yes, that is what needs to be said. I think, you know, as you were speaking, actually, I was thinking about our audience. I was thinking about, you know, 73% or whatever it was. And I think there is, I remember working with someone before, and he brought us into his organization for which he was the CEO. And he openly said, I want to do better here. And he described himself as, you know, one of those white male middle-class men in my 50s. And I have a lot to learn, he said. And he explained and articulated it perfectly. You know, he said in one sentence, he said, you know, I was brought up in this country as a British person on British 70s sitcoms. And, you know, what was socially acceptable and broadcast on the BBC and all the other mainstream channels was an absolute level of racism that is 100% not socially acceptable now. Shouldn't have been then, but this is what has made me. This is the perception that I have of the world. And I think at least us as D&I practitioners, our job in terms of affecting change is to hold a space for those people to be compassionate for that, thankful for the awareness, but then still to move forward and drive on. And, you know, sorry, Gary, go on.
Just to build on that, Elaine, actually, I think it's worth noting that when people of colour have to have these conversations in the workplace, and we are certainly encouraging that, be prepared for it to be unfair. It's not fair that we have to have these conversations in the first place. But if we want change, if we want things to be better, then yes, to Elaine's point, having that empathy, having that compassion for people around us, white people or not white people, who are a product of their surroundings, a product of their environments. And we have to empathise, and we have to deal with that in those conversations. I think my advice around tone and regard is be prepared for these conversations to be loaded with emotion. There is anger, there is guilt, there is resentment, there is a whole range of really emotive feelings that will come up when you're talking about this stuff. And that's okay, that's really natural. What I would say is that when you are part of these conversations, or when you're facilitating these conversations, keep it focused on the positive change aspect. Don't get lost in the, you know, 2 pence, my view, this is what I think. Keep it on the positive angle. Make sure things are aiming for progression, because it is really easy to get lost in that anger sometimes.
Definitely. Thank you. And I think that, you know, so if racism exists, believe people and accept their truth, what's the role of compassion and empathy here? And the fourth one with regards to tone and regard is to understand your role, right? Understand your role in this. You know, we talk about having compassion for white people and understanding that they don't necessarily know. When I'm talking to you and your responsibility, this is how I see it. And it is only my experience, my opinion that shapes this. It may obviously be different for you. But when I am to the you know, 28% odds that identify as people of color here, for me, I think that our responsibility here to talk to you is, as much as there's compassion, drive, change, is to have boundaries for yourself too, and the importance of self-care. I am going to guess that there's a lot of people here who have maybe made complaints to HR or to their business, or might want to say something, and then they get asked for help by the white board or the white HR team. Great. I mean, it's really interesting to hear your experience. Could you help us with this? Okay. You may choose to help if you want to by pointing out what is going on. But please, please, please feel free to say no. And if you're on the other side of that and you are these people that are being approached, do not ask for help. Like, they aren't paid to help you. Yes, that's your job. You're supposed to know what to do. So, you know, I think for me, in terms of understanding your role in this, and me as a person of color too, I want to have boundaries. I know I'm on a mission, and I have I can impact by helping and directing what needs to happen for people like me, but I need to have boundaries around that. If you are someone who is white, who is watching this and wants to be an ally, your role in this kind of splits in two, I think. If you are talking to other white people, when you're communicating about race, your role, I think, is to be effective, to make impact, or to be effective in how you communicate, whatever it is that you're communicating. If you are talking to someone of color, particularly to a black person right now, then your role actually is different. Is it about support? Is it about care? Is it about advocating? Is it about asking them what they might need or saying, how are you? Okay, it's different. It forks depending on who you're speaking to, and you need to know that. Okay.
Elaine, just to add to that quickly, so from my perspective and learning that I've had recently, speaking to the empathy and understanding the experiences of black and friends and people of colour, I guess come to this as an ally and like, hey, that's really out of order. And I had a friend telling me a story and I was like, that's pretty racist. And I was mad. And I'm expecting and sort of rallying the troops and going, right, let's take this fight forward because I'm mad, but not really having regard for the fact that that person was just tired. And you know, it's me at the finish line of the marathon going, come on, let's go. And I've just jumped out from the crowd.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to take them over the finish line, if you like. And it's actually understanding that these, that person might potentially just be tired and not have the energy to have that conversation. And actually what I've found in reaching out to people and just not a huge investment, but actually asking people how they are, the impact of that has been huge. And it's not on me to rally around them and say, hey, let's go forward, let's make this happen, let's make that happen.
The impact of asking someone how they are, you know, there are ripple effects to that, positive ripple effects that can happen to that too. Conscious of time, moving on. So we talked about tone and regard. Now this is about education and knowledge. So I'm going to throw up a slide about language, actually. Sharon, are you good to talk through this and how you use this?
Yeah.
Good.
So in the slide that's coming up, we've got lots of terms that people use in their everyday places of work, in their social settings, and this changes depending on each and every scenario that I'm in and I'm delivering. So depending on the need of the organization, these words aren't static, we will change it. And how I would really frame this is, and those that I work with, is that we ask people to look at these terms and to kind of like in their own minds, think about terms they would definitely not use, terms they would use, and terms that they aren't too sure about using, and the reasoning why. So the reason why terminology and language are pivotal in this is that from a lot of the research that you read, white people in particular are really, really worried about getting it wrong, because they think that the language in itself is the barrier is the gate in terms of opening up the gateway to this conversation. So I would just ask, I think Elaine, Gary, and Ryan, is there one word on here that each of you would definitely not use?
Yeah, half caste.
Yeah, I coloured would be a word I certainly wouldn't use.
Yeah. Half caste I learned in a poem when I was about 10 as being offensive.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you had mentioned half caste. So when I was at school, primary school in the 80s, all biracial and mixed race children were referred to as half caste. And it's important to understand that because language is always evolving. So I think where we get hung up by around this area is that we think, actually, no, it was okay before. Why can't I use it now? It's almost like when people try to justify the use of the N-word because black men use it in reference to one another or in music. There are some things that we've just progressed beyond that. And there are some things actually, in light of, you know, further knowledge or in light of the times that we're in, we just don't use anymore. Half caste is a classic example of one of those terms. And I would say that in terms of the word, the language and the advice that we give is that there are very few hard and fast rules when it comes to language. What you really need to do is that whole respect piece. Ask somebody you're speaking to how they self-identify. Don't apportion a title to people, ask them. So personally, I sit here as a Black woman. Another day I could be Black British, I could be a Londoner, I could be Ghanaian, I could be African British. The point is, it's quite a fluid, and it doesn't help in the conversation in terms of not confusing people, but you need to ask people what they identify as, particularly in the settings that they're in, because sometimes we switch our hats, all of us switch, and I think people from communities or who would describe themselves as a person of color understand the whole notion of code switching. That's not a good thing, but we do switch a lot in order, it's self-preservation and survival, really. So,
look it up, code switching. If you've never heard of it before, codifying, some people call it too. If you've never heard of it, look it up, because it's probably happening in your organization, you won't know about it. And if you think about, if that is happening, what are you losing from that talent? If someone is not being their whole self, what are you losing from that talent? Thank you, Sharon. The next piece with regards to education and knowledge is about self-awareness, okay? So there, I mean, do not get me wrong, you are here for 45 minutes, yeah? This is just a start. So with that regard to everything, if it's about how to talk about race in the workplace, and in general, how to be an ally or an activist and change things, it's about educating yourself, okay? It is 100% about you educating yourself, because right now, I don't know if you noticed, but you can find lots of resources that they were always there, but they're being surfaced even more now for this moment, for this movement and beyond. So we definitely are saying educate yourself. That's the biggest point that we have. The self-awareness piece is also really important. This is, take a screen grab of this, think about this as an exercise. So what I would invite you to do is to take a moment. This is about reflection and, you know, self-coaching, if you like, and self-awareness. So that's the point here, be self-aware. I'd recommend that you take a moment and you write the names down here of the people that fit in this space, okay? These are the people that are closest to you, most probably. There's probably other categories that you could put in here. Who have you seen? You know, Sharon made the point to me yesterday. Because of COVID, we're not regularly visiting anyone's home, but whose home do I regularly visit? Whose home have I regularly visited in the last 6 months? Who do I regularly have conversations with? And then what does this say about my circle of influence? And put the race lens on that. You could even do that with regards to religion, gender, whatever else that you want, ability, disabilities. But for this, think about it. And what we're saying is that if it's not that diverse, start to ask yourself why that is and what you want to do with that information, okay? So it's important about self-reflection. The last thing in terms of education and knowledge, actually the panel, I don't know if you want to share, obviously I just mentioned there's so much out there. I know for me, right, I think it might be useful to share with everybody, like maybe our recommendations of where they might go to find out more, because it is about educating yourself. Don't think that you can stop, yeah? Please do not think that you can stop because you've ticked a box and you feel good about coming to a 45-minute lunch and learn. Please educate yourself. One thing I would say for me in terms of recommendation is right now on Netflix, you can watch 13th, which is incredible and powerful and talks about incarceration, mass incarceration issues. And it's focused on the USA. Think about it and how that translates to if you're here in Britain. I want to ask the rest of the panel if they have anything that they want to share. I'll also just flick to a generic slide that I've got as well. Sharon, do you have one that you want to share?
There's so many resources. I think the list is endless. I think what I will say about education is don't see it as a one-time event. Lots of times we hear people, I've done unconscious bias training, so I can't possibly be racist anymore, even if I was. That's not true. It's a continuous process, and we all, people of color, white people, all of us have to continuously learn and move on in this space. So I would say that there's an Instagram, what are they called? An Instagram page? No White Saviors. I love those. They're really short snippets and they just post regularly. And what I love about that, it's run by Africans on the continent, which for me is really important as someone who identifies as a Black African. Within the UK, Akala is a phenomenal resource. He's got loads of clips on the internet. He does loads of interviews. His book Natives, for me, is groundbreaking in the UK because lots of the discussions and the resources we find are really led or based on society in America, We need to understand how it's playing out in the UK, and it isn't so pretty. We aren't so innocent in this. So Akala is just, as an individual, and the work that he does, it's phenomenal. I think we've got other resources that we will put in the chat, so that, you know, the book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People by Renee Edel-Lodge. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah. I've just stopped sharing. Gary, Ryan, do you want to share any?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I've kind of like picked out a couple of resources actually, which are quite specific for a UK audience, and also specific for what I've been hearing myself from friends, from colleagues, from other people, and from mainstream media. One is I've heard from numerous people that this is an American issue, so especially with regards to slavery, and I think it's really important to learn about the British history of slavery and how Britain's involvement was really key. And there's some great BBC documentaries about Britain's involvement in the slave trade. And I think knowing that background knowledge, helping to establish that, you know, this is a global issue, it's not just an American issue, is really important. And then separately, a couple of short articles actually about systemic racism. So, you know, even if you are passionately anti-racist as an individual, accepting and knowing that systemic racism is really what is keeping the status quo at the moment and keeping things how they are is really important. So knowing what systemic racism is and knowing what it looks like, again, is really important. So I'll post it in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
Thanks. Yeah, Sharon, I was just going to ask, because it's come up in the chat, what was the Instagram account you mentioned?
No White Saviours.
No White Saviours, thank you. I think for me, through watching a documentary years ago, I became sort of aware of the kind of impact that the messaging that I see has on me, and how unaware I'll be of it because it's happening internally. So for me, I know that through media, film, news, everything, I seem to be fed lots of imagery of Muslim terrorists and black men as gangsters. And actually, it's more about seeking out media that gives me quite a three-dimensional view of people of colour. And that seems to be, for some reason or another, challenging, because there's not a huge amount of it out there. But I think for those that, like me, try and commit to books but are not great at it, from a film perspective, I think watching Malcolm X from the early 90s is great, with Spike Lee and Denzel Washington. Before Black Panther, Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler did Fruitvale Station, which is a great film. Things like Fences, Selma, Moonlight are great as well. And I think for me, it's about what I choose not to consume as well. I chose to steer clear of The Bodyguard because, unlike everyone else who seemed to watch it, I just felt that I didn't need another image of a Muslim terrorist. So I choose to avoid some of the media and the stories that they're telling.
Yes, powerful. I think, you know, this is stuff that we've just thought off at the top of I took some time and just put the slide together earlier, but let me reassure you, like, yes, we will be sharing the links and stuff after, but you just have to Google this stuff, yeah? You don't need us, you just have to Google it, go into your Instagram accounts. If you're interested in the absolute lack of education that there is, I have 2 children, they're 12 and 11, and I am only recently coming to terms with how whitewashed Black history lessons were for me and the way that I see the world. And if you want that to change, there are many, many accounts, organizations who are trying to change that. This is the action that we're talking about. You can talk about it, but actually you don't even have to talk about it. You can just donate. You can just act and support the things that you want to support. Okay, so educate yourself. The last point was about psychological safety. Okay, we're gonna have to whiz through this actually. But I don't want that to take away how important it is. And hopefully earlier on we made the points about the emotional labor that is involved from everyone, but mainly people of color when we're talking about race and racism sometimes. I'd like to invite everyone to just quickly say like what creates like maybe one point that creates a safe space for you in your workplace with regards to sharing or psychological safety, whichever it is that you want to share. For me, I would say that what creates a safe space for me is I need people to have a genuine interest in what is being discussed. And I believe that I and many other people can smell it a mile off, a freaking mile off, yeah, if it isn't genuine. So don't kid yourself and think that you can just give the shit lip service. That's not how it's going to work, okay? Genuine interest. Sharon, can I pass to you?
Yeah, I think I won't talk about the safe space. What I would encourage, particularly the white audience, to do is to understand your own biases. The Harvard, I think, implicit bias test is free online, so you understand where you sit, and to understand that there are racial hierarchies, particularly in the workplace, and we should always think about how we're feeding into that. An example would even be language. If I'm bilingual, or I say my child is, and they speak Urdu, Gujarati, and Hindi, the social capital placed on that wouldn't be the same as me saying that my child is, you know, bilingual and speaks French and Italian, for example. So we need to really understand some of those really subtle actions that we have that really stop people feeling that they're included and that they're valued and their experiences are valued.
In one succinct sentence, can you explain why it's not the same, Sharon?
Sorry?
When someone compares the bilingual French or Spanish to Gujarati, or like, or, you know, why is it not the same? Why is the comparison not the same?
Well, so first of all, I was in education for a number of years, and I think how it plays out is when we're in schools and children come in with set languages, the children that would speak, say, Gujarati and Hindi are automatically put on an ESOL list. So the English is a second language, not valued, which means they need assistance, they need additional help, and potentially that really implies that they are not as bright. And again, those children tend to be black and brown, whereas those who come in, Western European, that speak the other languages, it's applauded and valued, and they can even take those as examples, so they get more qualifications. That's how it plays out. It's those tiny little actions that really has a massive impact on black and brown people within the workplace and within society as a whole.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, quickly, space, anything that you want to add or add to the safe space conversation?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. So I've got 5 things that I think I would need and others need for to achieve psychological safety. A positive regard for people in that conversation, non-judgmental, that should be an absolute rule, a forgiving conversation, Elaine, since your point, open and curious, and finally confidential. There are 5 things that I think need to be in place to achieve that psychological safety. And what I'll also add is a safe space in the workplace isn't reserved for a conversation with HR in a meeting room. Safe space, psychological safety is part of the culture, part of the very fabric of your company, day in, day out. So whether you're at your desk, in a meeting room, out with clients, wherever it might be, safe space should be complete, not just locked away in a meeting room.
Yeah. Well, Elaine, can I just add one more thing, just for black and brown people, is that, as you were saying earlier, self-care is primary in this, and don't feel like you have to be the brand ambassador for your race. If you don't want to have discussions, don't have them and shut them off. You need to take care of yourself.
Yes. Ryan, I'm going to bypass you, I'm afraid.
Sorry.
On the assumption that it's pretty safe for your average white man in organisations that are safe. I think for me, it highlights that there's so many organisations that aren't psychologically safe for speaking out, whatever the topic actually. I'm conscious we've got 2 minutes to go. We just want to, you know, if you do watch 13th, the very, very last comment and the very last scene, a man talks about the fact that when you watch documentaries like this or you educate yourself about issues like this, you think about slavery, you think about segregation, you think about things in our history, and you think, how did people stand by and watch that happen? How did people let that happen? Why didn't they do it? Why didn't they speak up? Today, racism exists on a huge systemic scale, right? We're talking about businesses, individuals, the society it needs work, right? So if you are one of those people that thinks, how did they let us, this is the time when you can make the difference. This is the time when actually you shouldn't be standing by doing nothing. You need to be doing something, because it's probably this, you know, it's not just the 28% of people that are people of color. You, as the 73%, or I've probably got the maths wrong there, you are the ones that need to do something, okay? With that, the last thing that I will leave you with before we kind of end for 2 is to think about personal reflection, okay? And I'll offer you a what, so what, now what. Write that down, okay? What did you think was going to happen? What have you learned? What did you want? What do you want? Etc. So what? So what's the impact of that? So what difference can you make? So what do you want to do about this? Etc. But the important piece is the now what. Now what are you going to do about it? Now what can I do about it? Now what is the best route for me? Now what am I going to commit to? Now what am I going to share with other people? Okay, please do that. We thank you for sharing 45 minutes with us. We'll stay around for another 15 minutes, but you know, please remember, you know, tone and regard, education and knowledge, psychological safety, and also your responsibility in this.
Can I just add a few points? Elaine, while I'm talking, do you want to launch that poll actually? Elaine, we're going to launch a poll to kind of like help us be better in terms of what we do, to make sure the next webinar we do, because this series gets that much better as well. So please do take the time to give us some feedback on that poll. I'll also take this moment to apologise to those who couldn't see our BSL interpreter while we were screen sharing. Obviously, that's something we need to figure out why it happens with Zoom and how to try and pin the interpreter while we're screen sharing. So apologies to those that lost, as I said, lost the interpreter while we were screen sharing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I didn't realise that was the case, obviously, and I've just noticed that now. Sorry, that is totally my slip up, and I think that's on my reflection, isn't it? And maybe to share is, you know, I feel the horror there of the fact that we try to make this accessible for as many people as possible, but we made a mistake in our setup somewhere, obviously. So that's not going to stop me, even though I'm feeling the horror of that inside, and I massively apologise. But I just want to share that with people out there, that you will make mistakes on this stuff. We're learning and we're trying to do the best that we can do. So please go into this knowing it's a process, and knowing that with processes we make mistakes, but actually you can get up and do something next tomorrow anyway, and hopefully learn from it. So yeah, to echo Gary's sentiments there, I apologise. Should we take some of the questions? Where are we with those?
We've had a few questions about terminology and about what, you know, the confusion around group terminology for maybe like a group of black men or a group of Asian women, and how we can try and understand that and figure out what are the best terms to use. There was one particular question which addressed BAME as a term, and BAME is a term which is some people use it, some people don't use it. Sharon, can I bring you in on that?
So really, for me personally, I don't like the term BAME. It's not a word, so BAME. It's the acronym. And for me personally, it's just a way to group people statistically. But I don't think anyone on this panel would self-identify or describe themselves as a BAME person. And I think it's actually quite lazy to say all BAME people, because it's just a fancy way of saying non-white, in my view, which again has white as the baseline for all that is good in race. So I wouldn't use that term personally to self-describe. I understand for statistics, but I wouldn't use it in reference to an individual or a group of people.
Yeah, I always rant about checkboxes when I fill out surveys and stuff, and it asks me about identity, and I am always an other, right? Because it's weird, even there's like Asian, Bangladeshi Asian, Indian Asian, and then Chinese, and I'm just like, what? I don't even know what the categories are there. I'm Filipino British. For me, I think if I'm with Sharon, but I think if there's a step that improves it, at least, let's not make it an acronym. You know, Black and Asian, minority, ethnic, it could be a group if you need to group. The point is that we're not all the same. But if you are talking about people of colour, then for me, I think, I listened to Afro Hirsch say this the other day, and people of colour perhaps is a label that we have given ourselves rather than BAME, which has been put upon us. we have agency in our choices, and I think that's where maybe people of colour that I know prefer that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I don't, personally, I can see why people don't like the BAME acronym or label. I think beyond that, you also have, seems to be a label of diverse people, and that seems to be all-encompassing of people of different ethnicities, and whether it be hearing impaired, visually impaired, female. It really centres white males as the status quo, and everyone else is othered. They are a diverse person, which I'm not sure how a singular person can be diverse. But you have that diverse umbrella, and then you seem to have BAME and different groups in it, and it seems to perpetuate the idea that white males are the status quo.
Definitely.
We've got a question actually, Ryan, whilst you're talking, we've got a question about, I'm guessing it's probably relevant for quite a lot of people who are viewing, which is about, you know, as if you're a white person and you want to, you know, bring this up with your white colleagues or your white bosses, how do you go about that in an authentic way? And how do you do that, bearing in mind things like imposter syndrome, or, you know, it not being your place to do that as a white person to another white person? And Ryan, I know you've done some great work in your organisation to do this. So what's been going through your mind, and how have you kind of combated that?
I think that the important thing to remember as a white person is that you don't have to be a black, Asian, other ethnicity to be offended by it. That I can be offended by it, and I can say I don't accept that, and I'm not comfortable with it. And I've done that within my organisation. It's not always easy to know how to do it. You might choose to go directly to the person. You might choose to go to the manager, the people they report into. But it's pretty easy at the moment with the news cycle, right? You can naturally and organically have a conversation by introducing something around the news cycle at the moment. If you want to make an impact and you want to engage with someone about that, then that seems an easy way to do it for me. When I've done it, I've had sort of 3 or 4 conversations that I've done that, and then we've had an hour and a half conversation, and it's been quite challenging, and it's disappointing hearing people that you are friends with, close with, family members with, sort of not understand, but you have to have those conversations. There's a responsibility for the people you love to do that.
Picking up on that, actually, we've got another question about family members and children in particular, and how to have conversations about racism with children. I know we're going off topic with regards to race at work, but I think, you know, there's parents in the forum here, and Elaine, I know you have conversations with your children about racism fairly frequently. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a journey, isn't it? Parenting, I mean, there ain't no freaking book for that. And we're all learning how to be good parents. So like most things, if this is something that that is important to me, and that will be important to them, even if it's not right now. That's the beauty of being a kid. This stuff is important to them right now, okay? But it will be, yeah? And unfortunately, the darker your skin, the earlier that happens. For me, it's about this is how I parent anyway, it's about being as transparent as I possibly can about the reality of the situation, using language that is appropriate for their age. That's my personal choice, okay? But having said that, and you've got to hold them in a space that is safe for them, like as you are as a parent anyway. Having said that, I cannot do this shit on my own, right? You only, again, Google is out there for you. You only have to Google like diverse books, okay? Diverse books, diverse TV shows, you'll get loads, okay? If you just tune into Disney Channel without much thought, I don't know how diverse that's going to be, as well as the topic's going to show. If you use books that actually teach about the world, what does power mean? Women of color and the speeches they have given. There's so many out there, especially from independent bookshops or actually businesses owned by people of color selling books. You can find them and you can look for them. What I would also suggest is not just to, you know, give them the opportunity that I wasn't given. Let them experience a Black life experience or an Indian life experience. You know, I grew up, you know, you just have to find the books that are written by authors that are of color. You just have to find the productions that are, you know, this is the call out. I know, I've noticed there's a lot of media organizations because of our background, because it was shared by the TV Mindset and Adil Amini. There's a lot of people within the media organizations who are watching. And, you know, it's the importance of the work that needs to get done just to actually, as Ryan said earlier, just to actually put productions and TV shows out there that aren't about racism, but actually just about a different lived experience than the village, white, privileged, same homogenous show that we keep on seeing. You know, so, you know, right now, I have to fight harder and search harder sometimes to find those for my kids, but it's putting the effort in.
Quickly add though, is that when we do that work, let's not undo it by those off-the-cuff comments that we'll have in front of our children when we're walking and we see, you know, a Black man that we may perceive to be intimidating, and we hold our child's hand tighter. We haven't said anything, but children learn from behavior. And when we lock the door when someone's walking past or crossing the road, those are the sorts of things we've got to be really mindful of, not to undo all the hard work when we've made the effort to go out and seek knowledge for our children.
Yeah. Thank you.
One final point from the questions actually is about if you are a person of colour and you are having these conversations maybe with colleagues at work or with your friends, and you do uncover racist points of views or racist actions, how do you control that anger? How do you not want to just go out and educate everyone you possibly can? Before I kind of pass on, because I just want to share one experience that that I personally have, where I know that if I want to talk to someone about racism and about prejudice, that's going to mean I have to commit an amount of emotional labour to that, and I will only do as much of that as I'm prepared to do. And my basic ground rule is that if there is someone who is explicitly racist in their views, I'm not even going to bother with you, because it's not my job, not my role to convince you not to be racist. And you know what? There's too much work to be done sometimes. That is the argument. There is a huge majority of people who want to learn and want to hear and want to progress. And that's where I personally can have maximum impact, maximum effect. That's my rule. Not saying it's for everyone, but sometimes the emotional labour of committing to those who share really racist views is just too much.
Yeah. I'd just go with that, to be honest. I think it's about knowing your boundaries, isn't it? And knowing that there is a lot of work to do. I'm interested in the question that's here actually about how can people engage businesses when they don't really take the issue seriously? And I just want to kind of answer that actually here, because looking at the registrations, you're all part of bigger organizations or you're freelancers. And it's why, you know, if you watch the news cycle, and if you've just been alive and watching anything in the last 4 or 5 weeks, particularly, let alone a lifetime, there is a lot to do. There's a huge amount of work to do, and we're up for doing it. And there are many, many other people who are up for doing it. The importance of this session can be profound if you make it profound. How to talk about race in the workplace is how you start the ball rolling, okay? So what approaches can businesses take to engage with those who take these issues seriously? Should businesses mandate actions all employees? You work it out. Does mandating things work in your organizations? Personally, I think, yeah, sometimes it does. But actually start the conversation and see where it needs to go. Get help from third parties if you need to. Educate yourself. But starting the conversation, because you know the nuances of your business. That's the important thing here. I've noticed the time. We've got a minute left. I'm sure we could go on for donkey's years.
Elaine, I've got a shameless plug here. I think for businesses, how they get away with a lot of what they do is that it's difficult to hold them to account. Right now, this is a shameless plug, and I'm sorry, but Business in the Community has a Race at Work charter that over 300 FTSE 100, 250, 300 organisations have all signed, and it commits businesses to acting in the area of race. So Google it, look it up, speak to the people in your organisations. It almost gives you a roadmap for which to follow within your organisation to start affecting change.
Yes, yes, thank you. I just want to take a sec to thank everybody. Thank you to Elaine, who's writing the captions for us. Thank you to Naomi, who's been the BSL interpreter. Definitely, Sharon, thank you very much. Your wisdom is definitely needed out there as well as with us. Ryan, you know, putting yourself out there and doing this, I think, even though this isn't your job and you're not paid for it, just massive respect. As you know, I give you respect. And Gary, obviously, I hope this is, I'm sure that you share the same opinion with me, that you hope this is going to be impactful and that people take on the action part of this conversation.
Absolutely, and this is the first in a series of webinars, so please join us down the line for future discussions. We'll probably go more niche on subjects. Also, I really appreciate the fact that we've gone 15 minutes over to answer questions and stuff, and the vast majority of people have stayed with us for those extra 15 minutes. So thank you so much.
Just a last little note, actually, if you, in terms of reaching out to us, we are here. We are all, our names are as we spell them on social media, on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're always interested in the conversation, so approach us. That's basically our job, to be able to help you hold a conversation and facilitate a conversation with all these facets in there: tone and regard, education and knowledge, which many D&I practitioners just like us can help you with, and then how to have a space which enables people to come out so that you can find out the nuances of your business even more so. So yeah, find us on Twitter, etc. Thank you very much, all. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.